You know what most people do on their birthday? Go out and celebrate, have fun with friends and family. You know what I do on my birthday? Play Halo 3 and write glorified fanfiction about characters I like beating up characters I don't like as much. So with the attitude I'm going into this slop established, General Grievous, the supreme commander of the Separatist military, chief minion of the Sith, though he'd never admit or in some ways even know it, and of course Star Wars' most prolific Jedi killer. I am, to put it lightly, a big fan of the guy. If there's an option to play as the CIS in a Star Wars game, I'm taking it, both because the corrupt Republic must fall and because it means I get to play as the funny cyborg with 4 lightsabers. On the other end, Primarchs. I am, to once again put things lightly, less of a fan. Some of them are pretty cool like Guilliman, some of them are alright like Vulkan, and some of them are Perturabo. I sure do hate Perturabo. His kids are cool though. And because I'm completely out of ideas, for this week's video I'm going to revert to the mindset of an 8-year-old and smash my action figures together until the guy I want to win wins. So let's throw the Emperor's sons into an arena and see who can come out on top against the terror of the Clone Wars. This video will not be fair because I am biased, I will continue to be biased, and I will not stop until I can find a way in which Mr. Grievous here can slaughter his way through 40k's most parentally neglected demigods. But before I begin, tell me, do you have a smoking problem? An interesting segue, I know, but if you do, allow me to introduce you to Fume, the sponsor of this video. Smoking's a nasty habit, as anyone who does is no doubt aware. You crave some nicotine, and even if not that, it's just as bad as an idle fixation. You aren't doing anything with your hands or your mouth? Grab a vape. I'm sure anyone who does it has tried to quit before, which is all well and good on day 1 until day 3 hits and you're fiending for it. Well, Fume is here to fix that. It's a nicotine-free, vaporless, batteryless little fidget device you fill with the flavor of your choosing to help kick that habit. For me, it's been legitimately nice. It's helped me cut down on smoking since it gives me something to do with my hands and mouth instead. The flavor's lighter too, kind of like flavored water compared to something like soda. When I'm writing or recording or what have you, it lets me get work done without immediately reaching for a pen instead. If this sounds like something you could use, it'll allow me to sweeten the deal a bit. If you grab a journey pack and use code PancreasNoWork, you also get a free Fume topper. It's a soft and replaceable chewable mouthpiece. Another great thing for dealing with cravings. So head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code PancreasNoWork to get your free Fume topper with your journey pack. Smoking's a bad habit and breaking it will only help, so if you have a problem with that, then make sure to grab yourself some Fume today. Now then, time to ensure I have about 20 videos worth of engagement from the comment section. Might as well talk about the Star Goober himself to start us off. I'm not going to explain who General Grievous is, because you know who General Grievous is. Be honest here now. If you somehow don't know who he is, what rock have you been living under, and can I join you? But for some cool things he can do, well, I'll talk about that all day long. Grievous can survive in the vacuum of space for some amount of time, which is pretty low-key, honestly, compared to the rest of the shit he does. He's got at least one grappling hook in his arm for improved mobility, although given that he can also just jump dozens of feet in a single leap, that's more so needed for when he physically can't jump and run. Like when he's in space, funnily enough. He can also extend a bunch of wires to electrocute people with, which we only ever saw him do once in Star Wars, and that was when he tied up Shaak Ti in the lead up to one of her 50 different deaths. But all this is boring stuff. This isn't anything cool compared to what he can really do. 4 arms, 4 lightsabers, or if we're being honest, probably 5 lightsabers at once minimum, because he can wield them with his feet if he wants while he's doing acrobatic flips and giving you a seizure as he pinwheels around the battlefield. Grievous is a master with lightsabers unlike any other, and I do mean unlike any other. Per the Revenge of the Sith novelization, he was attacking over 20 times a second, and before you ask, no, this was not Grievous doing the windmill thing with his lightsabers. This is just him swinging his arms at that speed. This is one of those places where Star Wars being live action can't really show what's going on completely faithfully, because at that point no one would be able to see what's going on until suddenly someone is missing arms or has a lightsaber jammed through their chest. As you can see with your presumably functioning eyes, General Grievous is also a cyborg, but that extends beyond the obvious machine bits, letting him wield more than anyone else with greater speed and accuracy. Inside his brain also lies various cybernetic enhancements. They do obvious things for functional cyberware, like increasing reaction times, but they also have a key feature somewhat less talked about. Grievous knows every lightsaber form. They were plugged into his brain and further owned by Dooku, because when that man said he was trained in Jedi arts, he was not lying. More than that though, he learns both through them and his own intelligence as he fights his opponents, adapting their tactics, weaknesses, and in the case of the Jedi, their lightsaber forms. Any habits they've picked up, fundamentals they've been taught, weaknesses they have, are promptly logged and accounted for. I'm sure you can tell by now, but yes, I am in fact basing this on 2003 General Grievous. The real one. Mace Windu actually fought Grievous before, other than in the 2D Clone Wars, where he crushed his lungs, and he admitted outright to Obi-Wan that he could not beat Grievous. Grievous was learning even Mace's own style of lightsaber, and he said if he fought him again, he'd lose to the General. Because while yes, Windu could crush his lungs, which was incidentally pure dark side business and not something the Jedi do, Mace knew Grievous wasn't giving him that chance again. Strike only when fear, surprise, and intimidation are on your side. That's his rule. His body is made of super sci-fi metal, perhaps not quite as strong as adamantium, but certainly durable, and he's a lightning-fast, strong-as-hell cyborg that can cut you into pieces before you even know what's happening. Just go watch the bit where he kidnaps Palpatine in 2003, where after the first round of blaster fire goes off, the clones get another single shot off as he dices them into pieces. That should sum him up fine enough for now, and if I remember anything else later, I'll bring it up as we go. So let's get this incredibly biased show on the road, shall we? You know, for number one, I think the Lion has the best shot at beating Grievous outside of the Wizard Primarchs, and I'm definitely saying that entirely because of the lore, and not at all in part because I'm afraid if I badmouth the Lion, my editor will quit. But for real, the Lion has the best shot out of all the non-psychers, and this is because the Lion is something most of the other Primarchs don't. Ultra Instinct. At least as far as I read things, the Lion when he's fighting on top of his A-game is essentially moving his body on his own. He's just schmovin', letting his instincts do their thing and taking him to victory. This, funnily enough, mirrors how Obi-Wan was able to beat Grievous. He was such a master with his lightsaber form and so good at being a Jedi that in battle he emptied his mind of all thoughts and let the Force flow through him, counteracting one of Grievous's main advantages. He still had to deal with, you know, the 4 helicopters Grievous calls his arms, but hey, he got the win, didn't he? As such, the Lion has the best shot, since by reckoning, that's not far off from how he fights. Actually, quite frankly, that's how the Lion does seem to fight in general when arrogance isn't getting the best of him, which does happen, but thankfully for him, not too often. In a weird way, he really does fight like Obi-Wan, which is why I'd say overall the Lion is the best shot. Not guaranteed, perhaps, but as close as you can get. Bro, they couldn't win the battle of getting screen time. How the hell are they gonna beat Grievous? I'm glad I started with a win for the Primarchs, because now it's time to get yelled at. But first, Fulgrim, the Palatine Phoenix, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, and one of the best damn duelists out of all of them. Surely he's a good match for the Supreme Commander of the Separatist military, right? Not to me. See, as much as people really hate bringing this kind of thing up in any versus thing, Fulgrim is an arrogant little shit. Now, depending on when, he might not be too bad, but even before the second and 11th Primarchs had been unpersoned, he was already making bets that he could take a planet with 8 Marines. Though he was nicer earlier on, certainly, he was always plenty arrogant. Of course, Grievous is too, playing with foes any times he gets the chance. He threw that Night Sister around not for tactical advantages, but because he knew he was in control and wanted to keep having fun. But he tends to lock in when he absolutely needs to. No enjoying himself unless he's perfectly guaranteed to win. See again, Tales of the Empire. Fulgrim is the perfect opportunity for Grievous to try and use some of that surprise Dooku taught him to use. Some of the Primarchs would be able to adapt to Grievous whipping out the rest of his arms, but in my mind, I see it going like this. Fulgrim proves himself a match for Grievous and starts showboating a bit. He's just gonna have tons of fun whipping around this weird Xeno, although while I'm thinking about it on the topic of whipping around, sometimes Grievous is like 10 feet tall himself. He's like the size of the Emperor in this scene. The Star Wars wiki says just over 7 feet. I don't know. Either way, I think Grievous is gonna suddenly whip out the 2 extra arms, start going into overdrive and throwing shit at Fulgrim with his feet, and of course, having analyzed Fulgrim's style, he'll start fighting like him as well and countering his moves. The end result is that Ferrus Manus will be saved because Grievous gives Fulgrim the Istvan V treatment. Although as another peace offering, I would like to say that Demon Primarch Fulgrim vs. Grievous would be the hardest piece of fan art to ever exist. 2 4-armed monsters, one a demon, one a cyborg, just going to town on each other. That'd be sick. The Lord of not only iron, but being a bitter prick. But hey, if there's anyone who knows attrition warfare, it's this guy. Although because of who he's fighting, I'm gonna make this one short and sweet and say that if the fighting keeps going on, Perturabo will actually be more likely to lose. Here's my reasoning. Perturabo is great at attrition warfare as much as he would bitch about that sort of deal, all those grinding assaults the Emperor totally made him do. But attrition warfare generally assumes the other person is gonna run out of steam before you do, otherwise you're just losing over a longer period of time. And in my personal opinion, it is hard to outlast someone who is 90% 100% robot. Here's my vision. Perturabo either whips out some invention from his Primarch Bat utility belt that's some kind of EMP, because yeah, that kind of stuff can get Grievous pretty alright. Alternatively, he tries to enter melee combat with the blunder and gets blended. I really like to imagine and in fact pray it's the second scenario, because Perturabo sucks. But he knows everything, okay, and I know what'll happen if I'm tied to railroad tracks and left to die. It doesn't mean I could do anything about it. Besides, looking at his datasheet for the Horus Heresy, he's not only slower than most of the rest, but has a lower weapon skill than a fair few of them too. Not the kind of thing that does well against the four-armed maniac. Although I guess I'll be kind of nice to him and say that out of all the Primarchs to just say to hell with this and try and shoot Grievous or throw a billion bombs all over the place, he is the most likely. That's how the ARC Troopers drove him off, maybe he can pull it off too. Jaghatai Khan does have some fights to his name, chiefly among them versus Demon Mortarion. He proved that if nothing else, he can take a hit long enough to get a finishing blow on his enemies, something that might give him an advantage against Grievous here. For example, if Grievous does something along the lines of Thrust Surge like what he can do in Battlefront 2, the less good version, then Jaghatai Khan will come down with a bad case of 4 lightsabers to the chest. In return, Grievous will come down with an even worse case of getting his fucking head ripped off. In fact, his stat line does lend credence to him being capable of at least holding his own against someone like the good general for some amount of time, with an initiative of 8, letting him get some good blows in at least a relatively even pace. The issue does come from how long he can keep it up. Not to say Space Marines exhaust easily, and of course neither do Primarchs, but with Guilliman sucking vacuum for 13 hours straight, but they can get tired. And unlike the Lion, the Khan doesn't have the advantage of Ultra Instinct without the white hair. He's a damn good fighter, but not that good. The war of attrition in a duel is ever in Grievous's favor as he learns the Khan's techniques over the fight and begins gaining the upper hand. I'm not sure on how likely it is that the Khan will get an overwhelming victory, the kind of thing where he sweeps in and beheads Grievous in one fell swoop. But kind of like how the Lion gets the most likely to win without magic award, I'm gonna give the Khan the most likely to get a mutual kill award. There are very few people less willing to commit to the bit than Jaghatai, so if he decides it's all or nothing, then it really is all or nothing. Although to be mean, I'm now imagining the ultimate version of that samurai trope where there's a single blow and someone dies, but in the rudest way to Jaghatai. He comes screaming in on his grav bike, ready to end it all in one joust, and then 4 different lightsaber slashes are all you can see on screen until you just see 4 piles of Jaghatai flop onto the ground at Mach 2. You'd think the Emperor's Executioner would be a lot better in a fight, but he really is the potential man of 40k. And yeah, I know there's reasons he lost his fights to Angron and Horus, but a loss is a loss. Fair's fair though, there's no brotherly love keeping him from killing Grievous, so maybe he'll stop throwing here. Leman Russ's skills in theory, and usually in practice, are fierce to be sure. The Emperor wouldn't make him his executioner, nor give him the spear that Leman keeps trying to ditch if he was a complete failure in combat, and he supposedly did take down 2 Primarchs. Or at least one of them. Nobody really knows what that whole deal with those missing legions is all about, but he was almost certainly involved, so that's a dub for Leman. It should be noted that the same thing he criticized Angron for, being lured into a trap because of violent tunnel vision, did somewhat work against him when he went to assassinate Horus, so there is the possibility Grievous could use his brain a bit and stunt on him that way. But it's also possible Leman could pull ahead early on and clutch out a win, especially since he has access to multiple weapons and will be proficient with all of them, for all that he hates the spear. As always, give Grievous time and it's dangerous, but Leman might be able to power through it. Although that being said, Grievous doing the windmill lightsaber spins would be incredibly funny, because I'm just imagining it cutting the Emperor's spear into pieces, since it's, well, a spear. Most of a spear is not the pointy bit, and I imagine it would be fairly easy to cut with a single wrong thrust. Of course, then you could make the argument that the spear is related to the Emperor, and one of the few things that could probably clash with a lightsaber without shattering, but the mental image is too funny to me. Leman goes for a stab, and his spear gets shredded, and he stares at it dumbfounded for a second. Then Grievous leaps on him like a trapdoor spider like he does sometimes. I like Leman, I'm not even trying to bully him or be overly biased here. I just, for some reason, really want to imagine him going into this fight absolutely hammered and being confused as hell throughout it. Hell, maybe that'll work in his favor here. He'll be too drunk to be confused by Grievous's erratic movements and just bulldoze on through him. See, now I'm gonna need people to follow me for this one, because I'm probably gonna sound insane. But, remember how I said Grievous is smart. As much as he's most known for being the lightsaber monster, keep in mind he was also directing a galaxy-wide war. His blitz to Coruscant in Episode 3 was not only through several core systems, but occurring at the same time as the Outer Rim sieges. He knows how to wage war and win battles, and though there was likely some help from Palpatine, at least for Coruscant, he knows how to go on the offensive against even the mightiest fortress. So enter poor Rogal Dorn. His armor is damn tough and his defense is damn near impenetrable, but he ain't perfect. Fulgrim went to town on him, which was admittedly as a demon Primarch, but he was still pulling ahead in their duel at the Horus Heresy. I will never stop making fun of Emperor's Children's fans over this moment because Fulgrim just walked off and through, but he did in total honesty simply walk off. He was bored and done with the Siege of Terra. Maybe he didn't want to stick around for what he saw as a losing battle, or maybe the Slaaneshi Demon Prince was bored and wanted to do other things, and it's just as simple as that. But against an opponent not bored, it ain't looking good for Dorn. Yeah, he killed Alpharius, but I'm hesitant to give Dorn too much credit for killing a spy in open combat. That tends to be when they're the weakest. I'm picturing Grievous jumping all over him, perhaps literally, and slowly chipping away at his armor until he makes a lethal wound and the Bastion of Terra goes down. He's smart enough to figure out any weak points, or failing that, he knows how to make one. And at the nicest for Dorn, Grievous too will just leave. He won't partake in the fight anymore, because even if he can't win, he also can't lose, and he knows it's just a waste of time. He too will go do something better, much like most people who hear Rogal Dorn lore also go do. A slightly more interesting matchup than one might think, because General Grievous is no stranger to fighting enemies with foresight. For those unaware, basically every Jedi has some amount of future sight. Usually this is limited to things like knowing where the next attack or two will land, helping them do things like deflect blaster bolts, or as it were, lightsaber blades. Obi-Wan was simply incredibly good at it since he would let the Force flow through him, becoming a conduit for it in essence. Most if not all Jedi were capable of it to various degrees, however. This did not stop Grievous from mulching through dozens of them. Much of the reasons Grievous was told to focus on fear, surprise, and intimidation wasn't simply because an enemy too busy shitting their pants in terror is too busy to fight back. By acting the way he did, Grievous would disrupt a Jedi's connection to the Force itself. They no longer could rely on their precognition, their natural connection to this cosmic force. They just had to rely on their lightsaber, and for all but Kenobi, this would get him killed. Now for Curze, his foresight already wasn't perfect. Aside from the fact a big theme of his story is that at basically any point he could have avoided his fate, he was beaten by both Vulkan and the Lion. He can be beaten, his foresight can be worked around or brute force through. Now take Konrad, who's a nervous, schizophrenic wreck at the best of times, and then throw the Sieger procedure at him. Bro's not going to be able to process the future during this fight. At best, it's going to be a near-exact replica of when Bardock saw the future mid-fight and got gut-punched, only now he's getting gut-stabbed. Hell, you know what? If anything, we'll just one-up one here for maximum bias. Grievous shows up, draws his sabers, and Konrad's mess of a mind thinks he's the assassin the Emperor sent after him. Grievous adds some cool Primarch weapons to his collection and walks away mildly confused. Does anyone else always replace that last U in Sanguinius with an A? Is that just the Chicago in me that can never be cleansed out talking? Anyway, Sanguinius, yes, the angel of the Primarchs, the one everyone likes. And he is pretty damn good in a fight, let's not pretend otherwise. He's beaten Angron, he's beaten Kabanda, and in older lore, his duel with Horus was outright what allowed the Emperor to kill him, as Sanguinius put a weak point in Horus's armor the Emperor could use. In newer lore, Sanguinius seems to have instead gotten dog-walked, but you know, that's the Horus heresy. Why have cool mystical stories when we can explain everything and ruin half of it? But if I'm reverting back to 2003 Grievous' first capabilities, I'll give Sanguinius the same courtesy. This duel would be phenomenal to behold, as two unmatched combatants not holding back go at it. Lightsabers and legendary blades flash out at each other in the blink of an eye, tearing up the ground around them as the warriors have at each other. And honestly, I think even though I'm not saying he's his biggest fan, I might have to give the fight to him. He's an incredible warrior without anything really to prove, at least in the same way as Fulgrim, and he too can see the future. Although, and this is one of those things that makes people angry again when you bring it up in fights, I think Sanguinius better kill him the first time around. If Grievous gets away, we might have another Mace Windu situation, where Grievous learns and adapts to Sanguinius' tricks and style, and for round 2 it'll be a much hairier fight for Sanguinius. But though I'm sure he'll take some cuts, he's taken a beating before and gone on to kill great foes after it. That was him during the whole Siege of Terra, after all, fighting demon after traitor after demon Primarch and always coming back for more. He can probably handle things the first time around. Perhaps it's not guaranteed, if only because the image of Grievous standing over Sanguinius' corpse instead of Horus makes me giggle, but he's probably got this. I must confess, viewer, that I do not hold an exceptional amount of faith in anything Ferrus Manus does. Now, admittedly, that may just me being tired of talking to Ferrus Manus fans. It's more so general confusion over the matter than anything. Out of all the characters in 40k, you pick the guy who died barely anyways into a 60-book plus series as your favorite. There truly are no greater glup shitto Primarchs than he. I'll be fair though, he is a craftsman, and sure enough he does have an exceptional array of weapons as per his Horus Heresy profile, and just from their names alone, they do some pretty nasty stuff. He did forge plenty of weapons for his brothers too, after all, and Primarchs aren't going to be using anything but the best. And you know what? Initiative 6, not bad at all. I was expecting Initiative 4 or something. But then, I mean, it's Ferrus Manus. He has metal hands, great. Iron Hands man has iron hands. I can't say he's the best in a fight, because what fighting? I'm pretty sure he did something similar to Angron and fought against something roughly equivalent to a Warhound Titan, so I'm sure if he hits Grievous, it's gonna hurt like a bitch, but hitting that cyborg is no small task. In fact, I'm just gonna keep being mean. You know how I'm declaring this fight? Grievous decides he has better things to do than fight Ferrus Manus. I'll leave the ball in your court though, Iron Hands fans, all 3 of you watching this video. Does Grievous leave out of genuine fear of what would happen if he faces off against the Gorgon? Or does he want to fight literally anyone more interesting? You decide. You know, there are some fights that are a bad matchup because the other opponent is more skilled. Sometimes because the power gap is so great that there's nothing that can be done no matter how clever you are. And sometimes it's because you're fighting the physical embodiment of rabies. Hello Angron, how lovely of you to join us today. Angron's physical capabilities are the kind of thing I feel can be summarized nicely by simply saying they are Angron's physical capabilities. He's bench-pressed titans, he's fought entire planets essentially on his own. You could shoot Angron into the face, and aside from him secretly wishing it would have killed him, he's just gonna beat you to death with the gun while your hand is still attached to it. You can't really strike fear into Angron or intimidate him because all he wants is death. You can probably surprise him though, that's still in the cards. Adapting to Angron's fighting style is also a mixed bag because he doesn't really have one, at least to my understanding of how he fights. He's closer to Broly of all people, because he's stronger than you, he knows he's stronger than you, and he's going to start cleaving and smashing until everything in front of him stops moving. You can employ skill against him fairly easily, but that's not really something you can learn from. The lightsaber windmill might work wonders against him though, if only because he'll throw himself into it. My best bet for Grievous would be if he can grab the butcher's nails on Angron's head. As a demon, Sanguinius doing that caused him immense pain. I'm gonna make the assumption that it won't do him any favors as a mortal either. If Grievous can rip those out of his head, he can win the fight no problem, if only because ripping those out will rip out Angron's brain too. Grievous gets to be a Spider-More too in that scenario, which is always fun to see. I want him to win, more than the rest of them anyways. It's Guilliman, one of 2 or 3 tops functioning adults out of all the Primarchs and a pretty cool fella all around. He's smart, decent in a fight, and a logistical genius. He's fought against almost every single traitor Primarch at some point or other, and against most of them, he has lost. Quite badly in some cases. Guilliman's at his best when he's directing a war or building a civilization. Under his command, the taxes will be collected efficiently, and if given a chance, things will get better. And I did mention it before, but for good measure, let's bring it up again. He was punching Space Marines' heads off in space, which is quite the feat. But he isn't known for being a duelist, nor a brutal berserker. He can be all of those things and more, and do them all fairly well, but he isn't the best at any of them. That's his and his Legion's shtick, aside from of course being the best statesmen and logisticians around. Grievous does not care for Guilliman's politics. He does not care for his Ultramar. He only lives to see him die, and quite frankly, die Guilliman probably will. Say what you want about me sucking off Grievous's cybercock, but Guilliman faced off against a 4-armed swordsman before. He lost and had to sleep for 10,000 years. This is not a good matchup for Bobby G, and the only way he comes out alive is if the Emperor does what he did against Mortarion and resurrects Guilliman. Maybe he could piss on Palpatine's front lawn like he did Nurgle 2 though while he's at it. Funny, the CIS Parliament just lighting on holy fire out of nowhere. The ultimate advantage Grievous has in this fight is that he doesn't have a nose and can't smell this rank-ass bastard, something I'm sure anyone who is in the same room as Mortarion has also wished. There's a few ways Mortarion could win this fight, though given his track record, I'm not certain how either of them will go. Grievous is lightning fast and capable of darting across whatever room they're fighting in like it's nothing, and Mortarion is a bit of a lumbering monster. Not that he can't move fast when needed, but the Primarch of the Death Guard isn't the quickest guy in a fight. I mean, just look at the Khan fight for how I'm imagining this sort of thing going down. Mortarion swings his scythe, and then hey, wait a minute, where did the blade go? Or his forearm, for that matter. They'll no doubt take plenty of blows before he goes down, but Mortarion was always the attrition guy for shit planets. You know, acid rain is the norm kind of deals, not necessarily really entrenched enemies. Aside from the electric tentacles, Griezon doesn't have any tricks like poisoning you. He just chops you into pieces or crushes your head with his foot. I wouldn't say that this is the kind of fight Mortarion is going into with any major advantages beyond being a tanky prick, which can always help, but I wouldn't say so here. There are exactly two ways this goes, depending on if you care for Magnus when he's described at his peak in background events, or Magnus on the tabletop, as well as if Grievous can disrupt Magnus's concentration in the same way he can the Jedi. If Magnus can keep up concentration and is on his A-game, then it's like the 2003 cartoon where Windu extends his hand and crushes Grievous's organs, only instead of it just his organs, it's all of Grievous being folded into a cube. If Grievous can disrupt his concentration, or it isn't primetime Magnus, then the red man is going to be chopped into pieces. I mean, come on now. It isn't like Grievous's whole thing isn't being the best there ever was at killing the space wizards as a non-space wizard. And for reference, in case you think I'm being myself and vastly overestimating things, consider Anakin Skywalker. In one Clone Wars arc, the dude was manhandling gods. Palpatine still ensured he never met Grievous, because though he was fairly certain Anakin could pull away, he couldn't say it with 100% certainty, and it would be really awkward if Palpatine's chosen one apprentice was turned into mincemeat. Now true, he also didn't want Grievous being killed, because that would interfere with other parts of his plan, but the point still stands that if Grievous was considered able to at least potentially kill someone who was bringing down the incarnations of the Force, he could handle Magnus in theory too. In fact, that's part of why he spins his lightsabers around so goddamn much. Even if he isn't hitting a Jedi, a whirling lightsaber inches from someone's face is gonna make concentrating hell. Magnus might go to cast some spell that needs a hand sign or a verbal component, and then suddenly he's lost his hand and he can't speak because there's a blade inches from his lips. It'll be a quick fight either way, but in my infinite knowledge, I declare it not a guaranteed win for Magnus. The War Master, the Arch Trader, the many other big fancy-sounding names to describe the guy who made 40k what it is. Ignoring the war in heaven, but GW does that plenty, so we might as well, right? Horus, as far as combat goes, is a pretty damn impressive figure, and every time he's described, he's always placed up there in basically every category as a Primarch. Only Fulgrim and Russ could outduel him, only Guilliman was a better statesman and strategist, and even then only barely, only Sanguinius was more well-liked by his brothers. There's a reason he was chosen to be the War Master. He could be arrogant to be sure, but he was charismatic enough that it wasn't at all hard to hide, and a good amount of it was earned arrogance. He was an incredibly capable man, and for all that Russ kind of threw the fight against him, Horus did still earn the victory. And, you know, Horus is fairly likely to win this one too. In the fight, he of course still needs to be wary of General Grievous picking his style apart with his intelligence and cybernetics feeding information on it, but Horus alongside Sanguinius is the biggest example of just brute forcing his way through the fight. Not literally brute forcing it, but simply being good enough to handle the situation. Grievous is a tricky bastard and is more than willing to be underhanded, but Horus is good enough on his own to do well too. Not a guaranteed win, but I'd bet in the case of Horus here. 7 out of 10 times at least. Bro, it's Lorgar. It's goddamn Lorgar. Yeah, he's a bit of a psyker, as it were, and yeah, he's still a Primarch, so he can throw hands, but I mean, Lorgar. To be charitable, it could just be that on my end, he's one of those fellas I find hard to summon up much of an appreciation for, if only because he's surrounded by stronger people. That's by no means a character flaw, but when I'm choosing teams for Primarch Gym Volleyball, he's certainly not first on the list. Maybe not last, but definitely not in the top 50%. He's not really bringing much to the table on that front, and no, the Avatar of Cain kill doesn't count. Not only was it a crippled one that had been fighting non-stop essentially ever since the fall of the Eldar, but it's an Avatar of Cain. Yeah, he went on to fight the bloodthirster Angrath too, but at that point Chaos was trying to get the ball on this whole heresy thing rolling, and even though it's a bit condescending, I imagine Khorne told the bloodthirster to throw the fight just a little bit. His weapon of choice doesn't really strike me as helpful in this fight either. A mace or scepter or whatever the hell they call it in a given moment is not an elegant weapon. It's the sort of thing that's predictable, even if wielded with skill. You see the guy swinging it down towards your head, you can safely assume not much in the way of feinting is going on. I don't see Grievous having much in the way of problems here, as much as Lorgar did pull some surprise psychic powers on Corvus Corax while the bird boy was beating his ass. I don't think it's really worth hanging around on this one for too long. Vulkan can't die. He's slow as hell as far as the combatants we're talking about go, which is backed up by tabletop stats. His weapon is a massive hammer, which has the same weaknesses as Lorgar's mace, but worse, and he can't die. Grievous could probably get some good shots in, maybe even kill him, and then Vulkan stands back up. The whole perpetual thing kind of throws a wrench into any talk like this. Which sneaky little guy can get the jump on the other first is how this one will come down. Surprisingly possible for both of them, given that for a dozen-foot-tall demigod and a person who's almost entirely machine, they're both surprisingly good at being stealthy. Corvus does have some pretty decent fighting skills aside from his stealth abilities, as shown of course by him slashing at Lorgar like a madman and nearly killing him. True, I did just spend a good bit making fun of Lorgar for being a stupid nerd, but props to Corvus for it. And again, as per the Horus Heresy rules, Corvus can actually switch up his fighting style fairly fluidly, which while perhaps not enough to guarantee victory, can definitely help stave off Grievous learning his every move and countering them. For the first time, the general has to deal with someone pulling the same changing battle forms trick that he does, albeit with a lesser number of them to do it with. I would make the argument he doesn't get his pseudo-invisibility, however. While biological things can't detect him, machines can, and Grievous has his brain wired up like a car battery. Maybe it'd kind of work like the active camo setting in Halo 3 where it's translucent, but I don't think he's walking up and backstabbing Grievous like an invisible Dark Souls invader. How exactly he'd do, I'd say, not great, but there is always the chance the jump pack wearing sneaky Primarch gets the drop on Grievous and does to him what Grievous did to Shaggy in 2003. They're both squirmy little bastards, so I don't want to declare the fight certain either way. That sentence, incidentally, translates to, I think Grievous will win, but I can't think of a good reason to say it for certain. Bite me. Dead Alpha Legion Primarchs, and God, I'm tempted to end it there. I hate the Alpha Legion. The rat spies of the Alpha Legion are on their A-game when you have no idea what the hell is happening with them because they're slinking off in a corner doing God only knows what, with a plot that makes no sense but the writers assure you it does. Sure enough, come a fight against a straightforward opponent, they get their asses handed to them. Alpharius was killed by Rogal Dorn, or maybe that was Omegan, and Omegan was killed by Guilliman, except maybe it was Alpharius and also maybe it was a body double. What a magical army they are, where you never have to commit to a single plot point you write. Either way, when the forearms get a swing in, the Alpha Legion's Primarchs get a dying. They do have the advantage of being the only two Primarchs who I'd say could fight together, since, it's twins and shit. That'd be threatening. A good thing for them, we never saw Grievous take on several Jedi Masters all at once and kill several of them, proving he's perfectly capable of dealing with multiple powerful opponents at once. Good thing an animation like that doesn't exist. That'd be real bad for the twins, wouldn't it? So why does this video exist? Am I totally out of ideas like I've joked about before? Did I want to make Space Marine fans angry again? Am I an asshole? The answer to all of these is yes, absolutely, but also I want to talk about General Grievous more. He's cool, you know? He's really cool. Makes me say hell yeah when I look at him. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the 4 lightsabers to my General Grievous, letting me flip around YouTube or I don't know, man. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there. As a consolation prize, I'll break away from my usual Warhammer-based biases and say Grievous is tearing his way through fantasy as well. That's a nice hammer you have, pre-Ascension Sigmar. Too bad you look like sliced ham now. Tyrion? Decent fight, but you better hope Sunfang can be used as an IED if you want to survive. Gotrek? That one doesn't count, that's Gotrek. Aside from that, bring forth the dead elves, dwarfs, lizardmen, and more, one and all. He can't defeat the Skeleton Pope, however. Such is the power of Nagash, after all.